Thanks so much, MR, for putting up this forum and giving an opportunity for all Indian business leaders to shine. And Raj, it's such a pleasure to connect with you today. You are such a pioneer, and you famously helped us break some bamboo ceilings all the way in 1990. You were one of the first CEOs of a major multinational corporation, and you have been a role model for the Indian business community. I'm sure the process of getting there, Raj, was not without its own obstacles and hurdles. And so, maybe give us a sense of what the path was like and how you overcame some of your own biases to kind of get to the top and pave the way for a number of us.
Well, thank you, Anjali, for that question. But before I go there, thank you, MR and Sanjeev and Mansi for putting this initiative together. And I hope this is a long life and real value-added contribution. And a pleasure to meet you, Yamini, by virtually here today. So actually, my answer, the simple answer, may surprise most of you. And that is to say, most of the hurdles that I faced were self-imposed. And let me elaborate on that a little bit because, it's not obvious. For example, for whatever reason, 60 of my 74 years of life, I felt like an outsider everywhere I've been. And as a 15-year-old, I went to Aligarh Muslim University, where 95% of the faculty and 95% of the students were Muslims. And wow. We had a Hindu-Muslim riot, living in my own country and feeling like an isolated person was really a unique experience for me. Followed that by 5 years at IIT Bombay, coming from a little town in UP, considered a backward state in India. It was always like, all these rich kids and well-connected kids treating you like, you're a nobody.
All right.
My first job in corporate America, where I was the first person in the corporate office, while most of the Indians were scientists and engineers or doctors. My 15 years of living in France and England and seeing the perspective of others as South Asians are viewed in England is very different than France and is very different in the United States. And the same thing I would say with my 25 years of board experience, where in many cases I was the first Asian American, first diverse candidate on boards. And I've been fortunate to serve on 23 boards, 16 public boards and 7 private boards. I've never been asked to quit, but I left when I didn't agree with the philosophy of the company or thought I had done my work. So my point about is, I've always felt like an outsider. And frankly, it's helped me a lot. I tell you what, in essence, how it's helped me. I think it's really given me a sense that people don't discriminate or are biased deliberately. Their attitude is formed by ignorance or lack of knowledge.
Yeah.
Rather than somebody being deliberate there to insult you or humiliate you or put you down. Also, I would say, it's also, some cultural barriers that I faced. We grew up in India as first generation, and respect for authority and age was almost over the top. So challenging authority or challenging somebody who's older than you was not something we were brought up with. And I had to overcome it big time because this is not the culture that you're working in the business world in America. So I would say, what I learned throughout this process is I need to get rid of my own demons. And, my mentors and what I call my sponsors helped me a great deal. Learning to accept honest feedback, because culturally, many times, people of minority, women, don't like to hear honest feedback because their interpretation is, this is to keep me down, not be promoted, or not give my due. But if you listen to carefully as to what people are going to say, and if they have your best interest at heart, you listen to that feedback in a very different manner. Also, even as a professional, I felt out of place. So here I was, I spent 39 years at the company. rising all the way as 10 years as chairman CEO. But I was a mechanical engineer with operations, research, and a finance degree, running a very high-tech chemical company. So what I learned in the process is I need to really rely on people, trust in people, let them grow, build a team, as opposed to becoming expert at everything.
Yep.
But provide my perspective. And also stay out of politics, internal politics of the organization. And also have a sense of humor. I'll give you a little anecdote about that. And I think it's all those things have really helped me a great deal about staying focused on results, performance, output, and the way I deliver those and how I work with people, as opposed to interpreting or over-interpreting this, what I say, bad experiences I've had, and we have all had our share of those over time. But tell you one simple story. This is, many of who have traveled to England, they have 3 lines at immigration. There's immigration, UK citizens, European EU citizens, and the rest of the world. And one time I end up at Heathrow after a 10, 12-hour flight. And I go to the immigration officer after about 2.5 hours waiting in the line. And the guy looks at my passport. He says, "Mr. Gupta, you're born in India, you're a US citizen, you lived in France, you're a resident in the UK. How did you manage all this?" And you could see the stern look on his face. And I could have been saying none of your business, which I thought for a second. But then I said, by paying a lot of taxes to Her Majesty's government. That's a great reason. And here is a stamp and off you go. But my point is, I think to me, the self-imposed barriers are as important. And we'll talk a little bit more about what organizations can do because they have an important role to play as well. But I just thought about sharing my personal experiences. I could have been bitter about those experiences and comments, but I think I sort of just ignored them. And that's what I tell my 2 daughters and all my colleagues. I say, and they say, "Dad," or "Mr. Gupta," or "Raj, you seem to have ignored all of this." And I said, "Not really, but I think it's served me well."
Yeah, absolutely. I really like what you said in terms of, dealing with your own demons. It's a lot of self-imposed ideas that we have. And I'm sure that, your story is inspirational to a lot of us kind of going through that journey. You talk about this in your HBR article on, inclusion and diversity and kind of also dealing with your own biases. I thought that there was also a very interesting point on inclusion and diversity. And MR mentioned this earlier. We still do not have diversity at the board level, at the CEO level, at the executive level. If you look at the number of female CEOs, it's like less than 10% within the Indian community. And if you look more broadly, there are not enough African-American CEOs or minority CEOs. What do you think from your perspective we need to do to structurally change this so that, just as you have pioneered and gotten a really great start, what are the things that we can do structurally to increase the diversity at the CEO and board level?
Great question again, Anjali. But, I think a little bit maybe untypical answer, but that's my belief and experience, that first of all, the leader of the organization and organization collectively has to have a strong conviction that diversity matters and it is important for delivering superior results. And there are plenty of examples. I mean, MR just shared the example of Indian CEOs and how their companies have performed relative to average of S&P 500. And really, the other thing related to that is it's more than a moral imperative. I mean, saying the right things, putting all the structures in place, all that is fine. I give you a great example. Silicon Valley is very well known for not having enough diversity on their boards or in the leadership team. I served on Hewlett Packard board for 10 years and saw a lot of change. But when we split the company into 2, Meg Whitman as CEO and Pat Russo as the chair made a very deliberate comment that we are going to create the most diverse board in the industry. And you would be totally shocked and surprised to see how diverse the 2 boards of HP and HP Inc. are. And we had the CFO, the general counsel, and head of HR at HP were all women. So again, I think the conviction based on these are important drivers for performance has to start from the top and throughout the organization. The second thing is, it's very important again, is to make sure that the culture and the leadership of the organization sets the tone of creating what I call even playing field. And what does even playing field means? I think the most important element of that is have what I call a very honest, transparent performance management system. Mm-hmm. Because without that, you always have this impression in the organization says who you know matters more than what you know or what you do.
That's right.
And performance management is obviously about potential, the performance, and your belief in core values of the company. But not be bothered by how people speak, how they present themselves, because so much of the bias is created by what I call stereotypes.
Yep.
And if we get down to facts and look at people's results and performance and be very objective. And again, having that is not enough. You really have to make some really, really bold moves to show that you're serious about this. I'm talking about 30 years ago, we put a Korean head of Roman House Japan. And if most of us who know the relationship between Korea and Japan, to have our biggest operation out of United States, outside of United States, headed by a Korean in Japan, was an eye-opener for everybody.
Yeah.
30 years ago, we put a woman in charge of Roman House Europe, Nancy Deshani, who now serves on 4 boards, including Bob Patel's board. First woman. It was a shock and surprise for the industry. And what I mean by that is really making bold examples so that the outside world and inside, everybody believes that you really mean what you say.
Yep.
Because otherwise, it's just good words. Another thing I would add is, having external intervention sometimes. And to me personally, having executive coach like Carol Vasilation was amazing. She worked with us over 20 years. And what it helped us to do was to get a very honest 360 view of you from the outsiders. And
Yep.
frankly, when I got it in 1988, I was shocked. I almost resigned from Roman Haas because the way my peers and my bosses viewed me was totally different than my own perception of myself. Yep. And I could have been irritated, angry, and do nothing about it. Instead, I took it on, and it helped pave the way for me and hopefully for many others at Roman Haas. So yes, clearly, I talked about self-imposed things and getting rid of your own demons, but also organizations have to set an example and a climate with the real commitment to seriousness, but not compromising quality.
Yeah.
See, that's the biggest damage one can do, is to compromise the quality of the individual, because then it's obvious to the individual and it's obvious to the organization. And that's not a good place to be. Hopefully that's helpful.
Oh, absolutely helpful. And I think you're absolutely right, which is having transparent performance management, which is clear, which provides the level of clarity for everybody. And then having a commitment all the way from the top, and then being real about yourself and the diverse population of folks that are around you. I think all of those are structural changes. And hopefully we will see more of leaders like you who are committed to diversity, who change kind of the face of business. Thank you so much for the time, and thank you so much for being an amazing pioneer of the Indian business community.